necessarily reflect the views of WSIC.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much for hanging with us here. 4 o'clock hour, 53 minutes and 40 seconds until you get to that 5 o'clock bell if you're a 9 to 5er, and I appreciate so much you spending that time with us here on Dollars and Cents as we give attention to, and perhaps we'll even spark some conversation regarding items of economic and financial importance. Now, you know, as the previous listener, we're talking on a number of things. Gosh, I mean, I was looking at my list here. I mean, we could do a couple of shows. I might just keep you around for a couple of hours. And no, I don't think so. Producer Joe won't let me do that. But I'm going to get as much as I can here into the next 54 minutes or so and let you know what we're seeing around the universe. But as we're doing that, you recall, again, as a previous listener to the Dollars and Cents show, that nothing that we're talking about here is intended as a specific recommendation for you, meaning that even though we're talking on any number of subjects, investments, investment styles, we're going to be talking on companies. We're in earnings season. You know how excited I get around earnings season, that we're going to be looking at some companies maybe in a positive light, maybe other companies in a not so positive light. That again, in doing so, nothing here is intended as a specific recommendation for you. We strongly, strongly recommend you reach out to your tax advisor, your financial advisor, or if you'd like to reach out to us at North Main Financial Group, love to hear from you. Love to chat about your particular situation to see if there are ways in which we might be able to be helpful to you. Online, you can find us, northmainfinancial.com. That's north like the direction, Main like the street, financial.com. Got a contact page on there. Leave us an email address or a phone number. Let us know the most preferred and desirable ways for us to contact you again at northmainfinancial.com. You're also welcome to call us here in the studio, 844-788-3464, 844-788-3464 here in the studio. I love to hear from you guys because I always want to make sure that what we're bringing to you are just good and relevant kinds of topics, things you may be seeing on your headlines. Can't promise you if you call in that I'm going to be able to get to your specific question, but give it a shot. And if I don't get it in this show, promise you I'll get it in the next one because I want to make sure that what we're talking about here is relevant and helpful to you in your lives. All right, let's get into it. What's hot? I mean, everything's hot. The weather's hot. My gosh, if you're here in the Carolinas, we got a little bit of a teaser here over the last couple of weeks. Thought maybe we were just going to kind of slide into a very serene, at least temperature-wise, fall season. No. Not going to happen. It's a blaze of glory out there right now, and we're going to keep it going in here with the What's Hot segment, talking about what's happening in the financial universe. And I got to start with one. I understand this may or may not, I'll tell you, probably not going to be your topic of cocktail conversation. However, it'd be hard-pressed to say that there isn't a more significant financial entity in this country than the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Now, you may say, well, we got U.S. Treasury, we got the IRS, we certainly have stock bond markets, all those good kinds of things. All those are important, absolutely true. But in terms of influencing, certainly when it comes to monetary policy, you'd be hard-pressed to find some other entity other than the Federal Reserve Board. I got to bring them up. They had a meeting here this week. The Fed Chair Jerome Powell had his post-meeting news conference yesterday. I don't think that there is a more scrutinized text of any speech, at least in my end of the world, than the literally individual words that the Fed chair says after their meeting. So let's get to the bottom line first. Fed Board of Governors meeting this week. As largely expected, no change in interest rates. That was all but a foregone conclusion. It certainly didn't seem beforehand with what the Fed Board governors said that there was going to be any chance of that. They confirmed that yesterday. No change in terms of interest rates, and specifically with the interest rates that they impact the Federal Reserve Board, which are the overnight lending rates to individual lending institutions. That also impacts all of us in a secondary kind of way. Mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, lines of credit, student loan interest rates, all of it are impacted in a let's call it indirect, sometimes tertiary kind of way, but certainly all impacted by that. No effect on the interest rates. I say that, yes, to give you that update in terms of what the Fed Board did yesterday, but really to say what I'm going to say next, provide some context for it. Because I certainly wasn't in this camp, and if you're watching me on the socials right now, you can see my body language and maybe even hear from the tone of my voice here over the airwaves, not in agreement with this, but it looks like now, based upon the language that was used, while they'll never be fully committed to it, and it's their job, to leave all the options open until they actually make decisions about an adjustment to interest rates. But certainly in my end of the universe where there are futures securities, which basically are bets on where you think certain entities, certain commodities, or my gosh, you can even bet on who's going to be president in the futures commodities, the futures end of the universe. But there's very good indication, let me say it that way, that there is going to be a reduction in interest rates in the September board meeting. Now, that doesn't mean it's a done deal. Lots can happen between what I'm saying right now and the time when they meet here in the third week of September for their September board meeting. It looks at this point like they're going to reduce interest rates by a quarter of a point. Now, like I said, a lot can change between here and there. There are going to be any number of speeches by members of the Fed Board of Governors between now and that time that tends to be a little bit of a harbinger of their thoughts and gives us a little bit of an indication about where they may be leaning, where they may be voting as far as interest rates are concerned. A lot of data between here and that time as well. All right, is that enough caveats? I mean, I'm basically saying we don't know, but certainly when we're looking at it at this point, it would seem that the Federal Reserve Board is going to not only move off of its course of raising rates and maintaining them, but now it looks like are going to be in a space of cutting rates. Now, let's talk for just a quick moment here. Why would they do that? And so you hear me talk about the Federal Reserve Board a lot. You hear me talk about, what's happening out there in the interest rate universe. And I always talk about how it affects mortgages and how it affects car loans and how it affects lines of credit, student loan interest rates, all of those, those things and more in terms of our financial universe. But what does that really mean? So next month, it looks like, if you're one who watches the futures markets like I do, it looks like there is anticipation that the Federal Reserve is going to reduce the overnight lending rate by 1/4 of 1%, 0.25%, 1/4 of 1%. All right, well, what does that mean? I'm going to give you a terrible answer to start. Probably not a whole lot up front, meaning it's not the kind of thing that is probably going to drastically change what mortgage rates are, drastically change what auto rates are, or drastically change unfortunately, the interest rates you may be paying on student loans or your credit card interest rates or anything like that. But the stock markets specifically tend to really like it. Frankly, the bond markets like it, especially because we're in an elevated rate environment right now. You start dropping rates, those high yield bonds from a capital appreciation standpoint actually get to be more attractive. They actually gain in value as interest rates start to get cut a little bit. So we could see that. I would anticipate that the stock market is going to like that a lot as that happens. I would anticipate the bond market is actually, we've already seen that in terms of inflows into bond funds, bond ETFs, bond exchange traded funds as well, that there's a lot of anticipation that that's going to happen because there would be capital appreciation in some of those higher yielding bonds. So that probably can and will happen. But what does that mean in the short run? What does that mean in terms of what's it going to mean for your day-to-day living? Like I said, probably not a whole lot. But it is an indication perhaps of where the Federal Reserve wants to go. And I'm saying that not because they just arbitrarily want things to be in a space, but they certainly want for there to be the proverbial soft landing when it comes to our economy. Remember, we were in a space where we had hyperinflation here just a couple of years ago. We raised interest rates pretty dramatically in order to cool that inflation. That has happened. We're now, as measured by our most popular metrics, we're in the 3.5% to 4% range annualized right now. So that's a little bit higher than what Federal Reserve wanted, but pretty much in line with what we can expect during this kind of time frame. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes next. Well, we're going to take a couple of seconds here to hear from our sponsors here on WSIC. I appreciate so much you hanging with us here on this week's version of Dollars and Cents, presented by North Main Financial. Hang with us for a couple of moments, coming back for the second quarter.
Dollars and Cents with your host, certified financial planner Joshua Dobi, continues straight ahead on 105.9, 100.7 WSIC.
Well, the tough heat hangs on as we round out the work week. Overnight staying muggy and warm, a partly cloudy sky as we fall back into the mid-70s around the Lake Norman area. Another tough day of heat on the way for our Friday, too, as we climb into those mid and upper 90s. Feels like temperatures in the low 100s. Drinking plenty of water, staying hydrated, and, of course, getting in the air conditioning from time to time. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll keep an eye out for a round of scattered thunderstorms for the afternoon and evening. That's your forecast from the WSIC Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Chase Myers.
Listen, save, enjoy. The WSIC app, available now in your app store.
Here's your WSIC community calendar. Birkdale Village in Huntersville welcomes back Dave Scott Crow and his Amusination Academy performance on Thursday, August 1st. Dave's concert and Pick Me Up open mic are events for the kids and the entire family. The show begins at 4:30 p.m. on the green. Parents, grandparents, and kids of all ages are welcome on Thursday afternoon at Birkdale Village for Dave Scott Crow's Amusination Academy. Langtree Live in Mooresville continues their free concert series on Thursday, August 1st. Langtree Lake Norman is open for eats and drinks all afternoon, with Bad Romeo taking the stage at 7 p.m. From AC/DC to Whitesnake, Bad Romeo will bring back your 80s rock memories. Grab your lawn chairs, arrive early to get your favorite spot, and enjoy Langtree before, during, and after the show. We'll see you in Mooresville Thursday night for the Bad Romeo concert at Langtree Lake Norman. Friday night, Birkdale Village hosts Live Under the Oaks in Huntersville. String Theory presents a free concert from 6 to 8. Birkdale restaurants are open for dinner, while Red Rocks will serve beverages on site at the concert. Come on out Friday night for the String Theory concert at Birkdale Village. The Cookout Monster Truck Bash is at the dirt track at Charlotte Motor Speedway on Saturday, August 17th. Sparks will fly as the metal-bashing 2,000 horsepower machines return for a night of high-flying action on the planet's most diabolical outdoor course. Gates open at 4 p.m. Bring a Cookout Cup for free early access to the pit party beginning at 3:30. Pit party includes monster truck rides, inflatable slides, bounce houses, face painting, an autograph session, and souvenirs. Opening ceremonies will begin at 7. Visit charlottemotorspeedway.com or the CMS app for information and details. To keep up with all the events happening around the community and much more, including amazing local deals, download the WSIC News app today.
Now more of Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Cents, presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much for hanging with us. Second quarter football reference. It's football season, folks. Yeah, you betcha. We're into training camp now in the blazing hot days of August here. I mean, before you know it, a couple of weeks, I'm sure we're going to have the preseason games kicking up. Producer Joe, who also happens to be our sports director here at WSIC, just informed me that now, help me out. Justin Herbert plays for the Chargers.
You got it.
Okay.
You know
and
your NFL.
I try to keep up. I try to keep up a little bit. Big-time quarterback for the Chargers. Unfortunately, injury, and he's going to be out for the entire month of August. So if you're a Chargers fan, Joe's not going to be good.
No, it's sad because I like Herbert, man. I like him.
I mean,
he's fun to watch.
And they had to be one of the top anticipated teams coming into this season, I would think.
New coach.
Yeah.
Just won a national championship.
Yeah.
So,
No,
tough loss.
It's going to be a tough one for the Chargers starting out. Stay with us. And by the way, we have as much chance, Carolina Panthers, right now, we have as much chance as anybody to make the Super Bowl.
Undefeated.
Just like everybody to be reminded of that, producer Joe also reminded you, we have as much chance to win the Super Bowl right now as anybody. It's still early. Still early. We're going for it. All right. I appreciate you hanging with us here in the second quarter, Dollars and Cents. Yeah, I know you're going to ask me, what's football have to do with financial stuff? You ever take a look at what a ticket to a football game costs? It's financial. You ever try to get a Diet Coke or a beer at a football game? Yeah, it's financial. Anyhow, appreciate you hanging here. Just as we went to break there before we heard from our sponsors, we were talking about the Federal Reserve. I spent a little bit of time on that under here on the What's Hot segment. I know it's not exactly riveting, but the impact of what the Federal Reserve does literally impacts all of our lives on a day-to-day basis. Maybe not directly, but certainly in an indirect or tertiary kind of way. And the reason why is because they adjust interest rates. And it looks like, even though there was no adjustment at their meeting this week, that when they next meet in September, as things sit today, lots can happen between here and there. But as things sit today, they may be cutting 0.25 percentage point. Now, you heard me say, especially if you're watching me on the social media platforms that we have here at WSIC, or if you're watching us live on the WSIC app. By the way, if you don't have the WSIC app, make sure you get that. Get over there, the iPhone store, get over to the Google store, pick that thing up. It is so nice. You just listen through the app. You can watch it on the video stream here as well. You never have to worry about being in range from a radio standpoint. Wherever you are, you can always pull it up on the app. So make sure you do that. So if you happen to be watching me, you can tell that I'm really not in favor of the Federal Reserve cutting rates at this point. And this is more subjective, so this is just my commentary to it here and looking at it. We need some time. We need some time to adjust as an economy to what these higher rates mean before we actually start cutting them. Now, my belief is, and that's why I'm caveating in this way, my belief is that the Federal Reserve is concerned about slowing things down too much. So they're trying to play what is nearly an impossible game. It's been cliched as called a soft landing for our economy. Again, structurally, maybe perhaps completely impossible, but they're certainly trying to do that. And so that's my belief about why they're cutting rates. Because I'll tell you, data-wise right now, I don't see it. I don't see it. If we really are data-driven as a Fed, I really don't see it right now. I don't see a higher unemployment rate. I certainly don't see we're not increasing in inflation. When I say increasing, back to the levels that we were here a couple of years ago, we're not going in that direction. Like I said, with unemployment, that tends to be one of the primary factors associated with how we look at interest rates in terms of what it means to have increases or decreases in cost of capital for companies. I don't see it. I don't see a reason to do it at this point. And so, you can make arguments, well, you need to be preemptive. Okay. And that's why I say it may be an impossible task because you're trying to predict things that literally not only don't exist, but we're not even moving in that particular direction. It's a legitimate argument, but it's a challenge. So anyhow, so you get your 101 here on the Federal Reserve Board. We're going to be watching them a lot. We're going to be talking about them a lot here over the next couple of weeks, especially as we're anticipating their meeting in September. All right, so you've sat enough through econ class here on this week's version of Dollars and Cents. What would be an appropriate pivot? Yeah, ice cream. Mm-hmm. Ice cream. I love ice cream. I know producer Joe loves ice cream. I know the boss man, Justin, likes ice cream. I'm sure Mamie and Bill love ice cream as well. I mean, we do. We like ice cream. It's summertime, right? We got to talk about ice cream a little bit. I got to tell you this, and you're going to say, what does this have to do with financials? I'll bring it in. Just stay with me here. I found, as part of my research, that there is, and this came literally, I was reading something from the governor of Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has a bunch of small ice cream shops. A lot of states do. It's not unique to them. But they have a bunch of small ice cream shops. A lot of them have been around for multiple generations. Anyhow, they devised a map of the 100 top ice cream stands or shops, if you will, that utilize local ingredients. So ingredients from the state of Massachusetts. That's a great thing. I mean, if you're ever wondering what to do, I would say if you would find that map you're close to or in the state of Massachusetts, I think visiting all 100 of those would be very appropriate. I don't think you would get to the end of that unless you do it in one day. That'd be a little crazy. But otherwise, I think that'd be a wonderful thing to do. Let's try them all. Let's just see what, who has the good stuff, who has the not so good stuff. If you have a favorite, a particular flavor. I mean, I'll tell you that my favorite flavor is the one in front of me. Literally, it doesn't matter what it is. As long as it's in front of me, that's my favorite flavor of the moment. So what a really cool thing. Anyhow, I know that kind of stuff is out there. It came across my screen. From a financial standpoint, you're saying, okay, what does that have to do? These are mom and pop operations that they were talking about on this map. And just in case you're wondering, greater than 50% of the businesses in this country have fewer than 10 employees. I'm going to say it again. More than 50% of the businesses in this country have fewer than 10 employees. It's the backbone of this country. It has been for multiple generations now, and certainly is true today. So get out there, buy local, very serious part of that end of things when we're talking about all things economic and financial. All right, so you got ice cream there. I had to pivot off the Federal Reserve. Make sure that you're paying attention, right, to what we're talking about here. Let's get back into the weeds here a little bit, and I'm going to talk about regional banks. If we're talking interest rates, we got to talk about banks a little bit. We got to talk about where they are. What does the rapid rise in rates mean for them now, and then looking at the possibility of cutting rates. Very interesting, specifically with regional banks. Regional banks, generally speaking, and I'm stereotyping in pretty broad ways here. Generally speaking, our regional banks or our community banks are going to be those banks which have a more, let's call it, near impact on our day-to-day lives. They tend to be the ones who are lending for local business projects or for local businesses, period, or for things that have to do with our local communities. It's not to say that big banks can't or don't do that, but you tend to see those kinds of things, especially for our small business community, come from some of our local community, even regional and super regional banks. What we're starting to see on my end of things, very, very interesting. So these banks buy bonds. That's what they do. They buy bonds not only to generate interest income, but they buy bonds with money that is placed on deposit with them. Not all of it, but some of it they do. Well, during this time of ultra low interest rates, a lot of these regional banks really bulked up on very, very low interest rate bonds because that's all that was out there. That's all that was out there for about 15 years. But what has happened here now over the course of the last couple of years is that there are many other options out there for banks to buy bonds at higher interest rates. The trouble is, they're all sitting on these great big piles of low interest rate bonds that actually, from a valuation standpoint, have gone down significantly in value. Just think about it pragmatically. If I have a low interest rate bond, are you going to buy one from me, or are you going to go in the open market and buy a high interest rate bond? Well, you're probably going to buy the higher interest rate one, right? Which means mine has less value. So these regional banks have been sitting on big piles of low interest rate bonds that are very, very challenging from a pricing standpoint. Some of them have bit the bullet. This is what's very interesting. So several of these banks, I'm looking at, these are publicly traded companies. PNC Bank, Paul Nancy Charlie is the ticker symbol there. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold PNC. Truist, certainly a familiar name here in the Carolinas, in the Southeast. Ticker symbol Tom Frank Cherry, TFC. Again, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Truist. And then Regions Financial, RF, Roger Frank. Again, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Regions either. But I've seen, as they're all publicly traded companies, I've seen them doing this, dumping these lower interest rate bonds at big losses. Big, I mean, I'm talking not tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars of losses in doing that, because the difference between the bonds they're holding and the bonds they can buy in the open market are so much difference. In some cases, 300, 400, 500 percentage point, or 500 basis points, in difference. Now you say, okay, what does all that have to do? It's going to be a good day for these regional banks at some point. Again, I'm not recommending to buy them. What I'm saying is this literally changes their portfolio structure by taking some pretty big hit up front. And but with the anticipation that because they're locking in these higher rates, especially if the Federal Reserve starts to cut rates, that we may be at what sometimes is called peak rates in this particular end of the raising cycle. That they're locking in these rates maybe for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, maybe even longer. So it's a very interesting dynamic. We very rarely see it in my end of the universe because historically, we've never increased rates at the rate that we did here over the last couple of years. So to be able to see this kind of thing and all the residual kinds of movements that are made, or the resultant kinds of moves that are made as a result of it, this has been one of the ones that came across my desk that I found just very interesting. So again, not a recommendation to buy regional banks, but certainly when we're looking at the economic and financial universe, a very interesting kind of context, because that's a pretty bold move, and banks don't usually make bold moves like that. They're usually pretty stodgy, and I say that not looking at them in a negative way. I'm saying that because they have a very high fiduciary responsibility, both with the deposits that they have and the loans that they make. So it's a very, very challenging kind of environment no matter what. But certainly when we're looking at it from what they hold and the kinds of things that they own, pretty aggressive to take that loss. I mean, they're going to have to come out and say, either if they can't offset it with some big gains somewhere else, they're probably going to have to declare at least a portion of that loss on their quarterly statement, on their quarterly reports. And certainly we've seen that. But when you look forward, I mean, you're looking at significant increases in the amount of income that they'll be able to generate then from those bond portfolios because of the significant increase in the amount of interest that those bonds are now paying. And like I said, we're not talking about fractions of a percentage point. We're talking about 2, 3, 4%, even more on average in those portfolios. That's huge. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but boy, when you're talking about it in terms of hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars, folks, you're talking about a lot of money. Well, again, we're going to take a little break here on WSIC, here on Dollars and Cents. Appreciate so much you hanging with us here. Hang with us through the commercials. Coming back again here on WSIC.
We'll have more of Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi following these brief messages on 105.9, 100.7 WSIC.
Well, the tough heat hangs on as we round out the work week. Overnight staying muggy and warm, a partly cloudy sky as we fall back into the mid-70s. Around the Lake Norman area. Another tough day of heat on the way for our Friday, too. As we climb into those mid and upper 90s, feels like temperatures in the low 100s. Drinking plenty of water, staying hydrated, and, of course, getting in the air conditioning from time to time. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll keep an eye out for a round of scattered thunderstorms for the afternoon and evening. That's your forecast from the WSIC Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Chase Myers.
The feeling of awe. You know, when you walk through the door on a hot summer day and the cold air hits you. Folks around Charlotte have been feeling that for over 40 years, all thanks to Horn Heating and Air Conditioning. HornHVAC.com.
Quality Car Care is your local Toyota specialist and a licensed NC inspection station. Plus, find a huge selection of quality pre-owned cars at QualityCarCareStatesville.com or call 704-871-2535.
This is Fred Lowry at Lowry Drug. We now have our own brand of full-spectrum hemp extract, also known as CBD oil. I personally manage this product as it was grown on my farm here in Iredell County. It was then processed and bottled here in Statesville. This is a true herbal extract with all the medicinal components intact. A product you can trust to be authentic. And since there is no wholesaler, it's at a price you can afford. Try it at Lowry Drug on Hartness Road in Statesville.
Hi, this is Bob McIntosh with the McIntosh Law Firm in Davidson. Since 1997, we have been committed to providing our clients with competent, caring, and experienced legal services. Learn more at McIntoshLawFirm.com.
Whatever the story,
we have to end our dependence on China.
have your say.
This debt crisis is going to set our economy back big time.
This is WSIC News Talk Now.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Just minutes ago ahead of Wall Street's closing bell, and this day can't end soon enough for investors. Stocks are getting hammered. Right now, the Dow and the S&P each down 1.5%, the NASDAQ 2.5% lower. That's because after first-time jobless claims rose to a one-year high last week and U.S. manufacturing in July fell by the most in 8 months, there are real worries that the Fed may have waited a little too long to start cutting interest rates, and now the economy is a little bit weaker. The big decliner today, shares of WW International, used to be known as Weight Watchers, down 18%, down 90% this year because its business has been pretty much wiped out by those blockbuster weight loss drugs. It's also now slashing jobs. Not everything is down, though. Shares of Carvana up 9%. New car prices at record highs, so it sold a ton of used cars last quarter. And Meta Platforms up 4%. That's after it used artificial intelligence to boost targeted ads. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
It's Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Cents presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much hanging with us. Second half. Today's show, 26 minutes, 26 seconds until you get to that 5 o'clock hour. And I appreciate so much you hanging with us here as we make the sprint run, if you're a 9-to-5er, to the end of your day, as we talk about all things here, economic and financial, here on Dollars and Cents. Now, if we're talking dollars and cents, and I've been remiss, haven't mentioned this at all. I should have really mentioned it at the front end of the show. The Olympics. I mean, you may not be a sports fan that much, and if you're not, you're missing out because of the Olympics. I mean, it's high drama. I mean, producer Joe was just telling me about some of the things that are going on, so even some of the funny stuff that's going on. One of the things that we were remarking on, some of the sports that are out there that are actually Olympic sports. Like, I get it, okay, track and field, swimming, gymnastics. I mean, that for whatever reason, I see those as being Olympic sports. But then some of these other ones, really peculiar. Really peculiar. And I'm not going to mention them by name here because you're probably one of your favorite ones, but very interesting. I mean, who actually gets into that and then determines that they want to do it at an Olympic level? Very interesting stuff. And big dollars. That's why I'm talking about it too. Big, big, big dollars. You talk about sponsorship dollars, viewership. If it's your goal from a marketing perspective to get in front of eyeballs, you'd be hard pressed to find something that's bigger than the Olympics right now. So pretty amazing stuff, and also fun to watch, especially if your favorite team or your favorite athlete is one who's doing real well. All right, let's keep going here. Talking about regional banks just before we went to break there, just kind of an interesting dynamic where they're dumping their low-interest bonds and buying, sometimes at big losses, buying higher interest bonds because the spread over what their current portfolio is paying is so big, it's actually worth it for them to take a loss and then look at those kinds of significant increased gains going forward. Very, very interesting dynamic. One of the things we're going to be watching. All right, you got Fed Reserve, you got banks. I even threw in a little bit about ice cream there. I got to bring up another one here. And this... It's not the same as ice cream. So let me say that. This is not a publicly traded company. I'm really bringing it up because of the dynamic right now with both private and publicly traded restaurants and what they're providing as far as their Let's call it the value meal concept. Wendy's kind of kicked it off, $5 value meal. McDonald's has one out there, $5 value meal, and very, very popular, by the way. The volume of sales for both of those entities, and I'm sure of others who are offering something similar, has been very well received. Very, very, very interesting dynamic. Well, somebody else jumped into the $5 fray, but it's not just a value meal. It is $5 all you can eat. You heard me say that correctly. $5 all you can eat. Say, okay, what do you get for $5 that's all you can eat? You guessed it, pancakes. All you can eat pancakes, IHOP, the old International House of Pancakes. All right, so I can't even say international, it's IHOP now. And they have $5 all you can eat pancakes. I mean, there are some reasons to celebrate, and that's a reason to celebrate there. Even if you don't like pancakes, just the fact that you can get as many as you want for $5, pretty awesome. And you can get them just by themselves, or if you happen to get one of their, I know I feel like I'm selling it. It just sounds amazingly delicious to me. That if you get one of their breakfast combo meals and you get the pancakes along with it, those pancakes are all you can eat. It's pretty amazing stuff. Yeah, I mean, again, you may not even like pancakes, but you got to try them. It's all you can eat, $5. How can you lose? Pretty fun stuff there. So pretty interesting when it comes to the food end of things. You know us here on Dollars and Cents. We're going to be talking about food as well as we're going to be talking about things like the Federal Reserve and regional banks and all that good kind of stuff. Let's pivot a little bit. And I got to come into this. This is the What to Know segment. And when we talk about the What to Know segment here on Dollars and Cents, these are the kinds of things that are probably a part of your experience or have been a part of your experience, maybe a part of the experience of a spouse or a family member, colleague kind of thing. And if they're not a part of your experience today, very possible they're going to be in the future. And it has to do with the broad idea of beneficiaries. And I'm going to tell a story here in a minute. This story actually happens to be true. And it's out there in the public realm. So if you happen to hear some details which are maybe familiar to something that you've read online, there's a reason why. I'm not going to use the names or the specifics of the people involved in order to just maintain the story in and of itself, but this is something that's out there in the public realm. So talking about beneficiaries, what are beneficiaries? Beneficiaries are those who inherit from someone or some entity in some way. Most often, for most folks, beneficiaries are named on retirement accounts, investment accounts, and life insurance policies or annuity contracts or something similar. That is where most beneficiaries are named. Now, you can also have beneficiaries named in a will, say for other non-contract related kinds of investments or holdings as well. Those are also considered beneficiaries. What I'm going to focus on here is actually with retirement account beneficiaries, specifically 401k beneficiaries. I'm going to tell you a little story. And this is out there. There's a gentleman who worked for Procter & Gamble. So that's where I'm coming into the market end of things. Procter & Gamble, publicly traded company based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. PG, Paul Green. It is not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Procter & Gamble stock. But this gentleman worked for them for the better part of 30 years. And when he was starting there, actually in the mid to late 80s, he made some designations as far as his retirement account was concerned. And he added at that time, who at that time was his girlfriend's name as the beneficiary on the account. He was just starting it out. He was not married. He had a girlfriend at the time. He named a girlfriend as his beneficiary on his 401k account. Very common kind of thing to do that. The interesting part of the story, perhaps tragic part of the story, is that unfortunately this gentleman here now a couple of decades later passed away at age 59, and he was just a couple of months short of retiring from Procter & Gamble. And the challenge has been, and there is contention, there have been lawsuits filed with regards to his 401k. The challenge has been that the girlfriend that he named on as his beneficiary in the late 1980s was never changed. Meaning that the beneficiary for a girlfriend that he had for a relatively short period of time, at least insofar as his career was concerned, continued to be the beneficiary on that account and was the beneficiary on that account when he passed away. Now, if you know about beneficiary designations can be changed pretty much at any time on most things before you pass away. After you pass away, in almost every single instance, I have to say almost because every once in a while there is a caveat, but in almost every single instance, those beneficiary designations become irrevocable, meaning whomever is named as the beneficiary on that account when you pass away whether you may have had that intention or not at the time that you passed away, is the beneficiary. You can see where I'm going here. So this is an old girlfriend from over 30 years ago who was named as the beneficiary on that 401k. Gentleman got married, got divorced, all of those kinds of things, and never changed it from the old girlfriend. So from a legal standpoint, the old girlfriend was making a claim as the beneficiary on the account, and she was notified as a beneficiary on the account. Well, the gentleman who was getting ready to retire from Procter & Gamble, his family then sued Procter & Gamble, the woman who was named as the beneficiary, saying that that was not the gentleman's intention. I don't know that it's going to fly, folks. It's still out in the court system right now. But I don't know that it's going to fly because in almost all instances, when you name a beneficiary on an account, that's the way it's going to be when you pass away unless you change it. That's why we encourage at North Main Financial, at least annually. It doesn't have to take a long time, but at least annually, just take a gander at who's the beneficiary on your accounts. Life happens. We get married, we get divorced, people, their kids born, or people pass away, all kinds of stuff that happens. And very, very important that you make sure that your beneficiary designations change along with that. Because like in this instance, and like I said, this is a real story. This is out there in the public realm. These lawsuits are real. There is contention. And I also have to tell you, this is from my experience doing this almost 30 years. This is not a unique experience. I've been involved with several different groups who have been on either side of this process before they came to us. And North Main Financial Group, and have had to deal with these kinds of very, very challenging spaces. And in most instances, it's out of sight, out of mind, right? It's not the kind of thing that came across their radar screen. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that you checked the beneficiaries on your 401k or your IRA? It may have been a while. I mean, it may have been a long while. We see that all the time with new clients who come to North Main that, when was the last time you took a look at this? Well, I don't know, maybe before we got married. How long you been married? Well, about 25 years. Well, that's probably a good idea. Take a look at it. Make sure it continues to line up. Beneficiary designations, so important. So again, beneficiary designations, beneficiaries of retirement accounts, IRAs, life insurance policies, they all apply here because all the same rules apply. Annuity contracts, anything that you may have a designation out there where you can specifically name a beneficiary, transfer on death accounts and the like, or POD, payable on death accounts, you need to make sure that those continue to line up with your wishes. Because if you let them run for too long, like I said, life happens. And in almost all instances, when you pass away, generally speaking, those become irrevocable. Meaning whether you intended it to go to the old girlfriend, old boyfriend, to a friend of yours, a buddy of yours, just because you had to put a name in there whenever you started the account, generally speaking, after you pass away, it doesn't matter. It's going in that direction. And so it becomes a very, very challenging kind of space in that time, and it can be very easily resolved ahead of time. So for almost all instances, you can get a change of beneficiary form. It takes you about 5 minutes to make the edits and the changes to it. You submit it to the trustee or to the account administrator. It literally is updated in real time. And so it's not the kind of thing that it takes 30 days to do or it takes you 2 hours to complete a form. You just need to make sure that whether it's specific names, relatives, non-relatives, trusts, all of those kinds of things, which can be beneficiaries on those particular contracts, you want to make sure to do that. And then again, I know it's not racy or exciting, but it can have very real, large, life-changing impacts. You want to make sure you just take a gander at that about once a year. Just take a look at it. Just do it as part of looking at your annual statements. Just take a look at it. Make sure that it's something that is lined up with your wishes. And if it's not, make sure that you get in there and change it. It's not that hard to do. And make sure that it continues to line up with your wishes. Well, friends, I appreciate so much you hanging with us here on Dollars and Cents, presented by North Main Financial. We're going to hear from our sponsors here on WSIC.
We'll have more of Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi following these brief messages on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Well, the tough heat hangs on as we round out the work week. Overnight staying muggy and warm, partly cloudy skies. We fall back into the mid-70s around the Lake Norman area. Another tough day of heat on the way for our Friday, too. As we climb into those mid and upper 90s, feels like temperatures in the low 100s. Drinking plenty of water, staying hydrated, and, of course, getting in the air conditioning from time to time. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll keep an eye out for a round of scattered thunderstorms for the afternoon and evening. That's your forecast from the WSIC Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Chase Myers.
Here's your WSIC community calendar. Birkdale Village in Huntersville welcomes back Dave Scott Crow and his Amusination Academy performance on Thursday, August 1st. Dave's concert and Pick Me Up open mic are events for the kids and the entire family. The show begins at 4:30 p.m. on the green. Parents, grandparents, and kids of all ages are welcome on Thursday afternoon at Birkdale Village for Dave Scott Crow's Amusination Academy. Langtree Live in Mooresville continues their free concert series on Thursday, August 1st. Langtree Lake Norman is open for eats and drinks all afternoon, with Bad Romeo taking the stage at 7 p.m. From AC/DC to Whitesnake, Bad Romeo will bring back your 80s rock memories. Grab your lawn chairs, arrive early to get your favorite spot, and enjoy Langtree before, during, and after the show. We'll see you in Mooresville Thursday night for the Bad Romeo concert at Langtree Lake Norman. Friday night, Birkdale Village hosts Live Under the Oaks in Huntersville. String Theory presents a free concert from 6 to 8. Birkdale restaurants are open for dinner, while Red Rocks will serve beverages on site at the concert. Come on out Friday night for the String Theory concert at Birkdale Village. The Cookout Monster Truck Bash is at the dirt track at Charlotte Motor Speedway on Saturday, August 17th. Sparks will fly as the metal-bashing 2,000 horsepower machines return for a night of high-flying action on the planet's most diabolical outdoor course. Gates open at 4 p.m. Bring a Cookout Cup for free early access to the pit party beginning at 3:30. Pit party includes monster truck rides, inflatable slides, bounce houses, face painting, an autograph session, and souvenirs. Opening ceremonies will begin at 7. Visit charlottemotorspeedway.com or the CMS app for information and details. To keep up with all the events happening around the community and much more, including amazing local deals, download the WSIC News app today.
Making your money make sense. Dollars and Cents with CFP Joshua Dobi on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Cents, presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much for hanging with us here. Fourth quarter football reference of today's show. Appreciate you hanging with us. If you're 9 to 5 or 11 minutes, 56 seconds, you're almost there. And I appreciate you spending that time with us as we're giving some attention to what's happening around us in the financial and economic universe. Just talking about, as we were going to break there, the importance of beneficiary designations. And when I say the importance of it, it's not something to which we give a lot of attention. I get it. It's not the kind of thing you're like, well, can't wait to take a look at that. It's kind of like legal documents, right? It's not the kind of thing to which you want to give attention. However, when you need them, it's important, like insurance, that kind of stuff. But when you need it, it's important. So you want to make sure that just as part of either your annual review or if you have a time, when you take a look at finances or you just, whether it's the end of the year, the beginning of the year, midpoint of the year, or any points in between, make sure, just take a gander at it. Make sure it lines up with your wishes, because in almost all instances, as you pass away, whatever's on there, that's what's going to be followed. All right, I know you want to talk about markets here. Let's get into it. Earnings season. Gosh, I could talk the whole hour, but it'd probably just drive you nuts if I did something like that. It's earnings season. Very interesting earnings season. It always is, because this is where you see in some real terms about where companies are. A couple of big ones today. I didn't get a chance to see what they reported before I came on the air here, but after the market closed at 4 p.m. Eastern, we had Apple and Amazon. I don't know where they reported yet. I'm going to talk about them next week, I'm sure. Let me talk about the ones that I do know. And just very, very interesting. Got to start with Meta. Whew. Facebook parent, holy mackerel. Again, Meta, M-E, it's Mary, Edward, Tom, Alpha, Amazon, Alpha, Mary, Zulu, Nancy, and Apple is Alpha, Alpha, Paul, Larry. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any of those. We're talking about them in terms of what they're reporting on their quarterly earnings. Boy, Meta, I mean, they're printing cash over there. Unbelievable how much they are, and it's around this AI and when it's artificial intelligence and what that means and their investment in it and what that's going to mean in terms of future, obviously, revenue and profit margin possibilities. I mean, the stock took off as a result of that. The market really liked that. The market really likes a lot of things that are touching AI right now. And it doesn't mean that all companies that are in AI are going to make money. Certainly not true. It doesn't mean that all companies that are making money in AI right now are going to continue to do that. And I say that, and you may say, okay, you kind of have to say that Folks, I've lived through it in real time. I remember distinctly. All right, this is old man stuff coming at you now. I remember distinctly in the late 1990s when conversations were rampant in circles that I kept, when the internet was really coming online, and I mean that in a literal sense. It was becoming much more prevalent, much more in use. Yes, that was the time of the dial-up modem. Yes, I used one. Yes, it was miserable, but it was in that time. I had a lot of conversations in the investment universe that the internet was going to make brick and mortar stores and brick and mortar experiences obsolete. Basically, we'd be able to do everything from a device of some kind. And you can make an argument with today's smartphones. We're pretty much there. However, we have more square footage in residential and commercial real estate and retail real estate. We have more square footage now than at any time in our history. So not only has it not taken it away, we actually have more of it. It's amazing. It's often how those things happen. I see the same thing with AI. When folks talk about, and I don't want to lump crypto into here as well, with cryptocurrency. Folks say, well, it's going to replace this or replace that. First of all, how do you know? Because you need to make a valid argument why that's the case, not just because, well, a certain number of folks like it. Tons of folks like smartphones. They haven't replaced real estate at this point. But also when you look at it in terms of what its use is going to be going forward in many spaces. It's both and, not either or. What I mean is, yes, artificial intelligence is going to be around in some way. What is it going to mean in terms of how we're going to use it? Don't know. Is it going to replace some things? Maybe. When you start talking large scale kinds of things, very likely untrue that it's going to replace large swaths of either how we engage in commerce or how we manage our day-to-day lives. Will it be a part of it? Absolutely. Just like the internet is today, just like our smartphones are today, and they certainly weren't that case in the late 1990s. And yes, I was there, and no, I wasn't 4 years old at that time. So I remember it quite well. All right, so looking at the markets, all right, yeah. And so as we're thinking about what kinds of things then earnings-wise in the earnings end of the universe, it's going to be interesting to see what that means. So go ahead, Producer Joe. Go ahead. You're on the air with WSIC and Dollars and Cents.
Hello. How you doing today, Doc? I'm
doing fine. How are you doing?
All right. The question is what
I'm going to jump in on you here. Unfortunately, you're breaking up, and that sometimes happens with cell phone service. If you can hang up, call back. We'll see if we can get you on the air. And if we can't get you on the air, make sure you leave your question, and I'll make sure to address it on this end of things.
He was going to ask you if you foresee the market ever going back to what it used to be versus what it is now.
Yeah, it's
the economy.
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is always going to be a horrible answer. The answer is always going to be yes and no. Meaning that our markets, so on the yes side of things, going back to what it used to be, we run in cycles, right? So when we're talking about markets, we're always going to be looking at cycles. There are going to be times when things are great. There are going to be times when things aren't so great. And so we always know that that's going to be part. So yes, it will always revert in some instances back to what it was. But will it ever be exactly as it was previously? Very likely not. And we were just talking about the technology end of things. We're talking about the internet end of things, or artificial intelligence. Yeah, probably forevermore, that's going to impact and change how we interact as an economy and how we interact from a financial standpoint. I mean, like I said, just look at your smartphone. Look at the things we can do on our smartphones that you used to have to go into a bank branch, go into a retail space, you actually physically move in a certain direction. And now you can do it with a couple of clicks off your thumbs. So those kinds of things can and do change things forever. But in terms of the market aspect of things, will it go back to the ways that it was? Yeah. In some ways, does that mean that we're going to regress to what the market levels were in the late 1990s or late 1980s? No, I certainly hope not. But are there cyclical aspects of things where we will regress from where we are right now, i.e., will things pull back? I promise you. And I can't say that too often in this business, but I promise you that things will pull back at some measure. And it usually happens when we least expect it. It usually happens when when folks start to, en masse, start thinking in a straight line. Truly. I mean, we're kind of in that space a little bit right now, especially in the more aggressive end of the technology sector or the semiconductor companies, AI-related companies. I mean, I really have to say, there's some straight line thinking right now. that just because they're associated with AI or just because they're associated with the semiconductor or technology and things are going to go straight up. And folks, it just doesn't happen that way. Now, I can almost hear you coming back at me saying, well, it has been for the last year and a half. You are correct. I cannot argue with you there. But that's not the way that it moves in perpetuity. And so it's important to keep that in mind. It's important to keep valuations in mind. It's important to remember that the market does move in cycles. There are good parts of the cycle. There are not so good parts of the cycle. And it absolutely has to do that. So there is no space where it just moves positively in perpetuity. By the way, the opposite is true, because I have the same conversations whenever the market goes down significantly for a significant period of time. Is this the way that it's going to be forever? No, it won't be, because we move in cycles. What's the catalyst? What's the genesis of those kinds of things? Very, very hard to know up front. Almost impossible to know up front. But there always are, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's more economic, whether it's because of monetary or fiscal policy changes in Washington, D.C. Any of those things can and do move the positions of the markets. But that's why it's important. When you hear me talking about the markets, when you hear me talking about being careful, it's important to be diversified. It's important to understand what you own. I mean, I'm going to use the S&P 500 index. It's an easy example. You've heard me say this, I know, here several times over the last several months, but I got to bring it out. It's not because the S&P 500 index is bad. I'm not saying that, but I do have to make sure that you understand what the S&P 500 index is. You say, well, Joshua, the S&P 500 index, 500 most widely traded companies in the U.S. domestic stock market. Yes, you're correct. Can't argue with that. However, do you understand how the index goes together, and then specifically how the index moves? Because that's really what matters, right? Owning those 500 companies is important, but you want that value to appreciate. And by goodness, if you have owned the S&P 500 index in a fund here over the last year and a half, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And I'm not trying to look the gift horse in the proverbial mouth here. What I am saying is, do you understand what you own? Specifically, do you understand what that positive performance has been from? Because markets, generally speaking, market capitalization, in terms of how the S&P 500 index is put together, is paramount, meaning that the largest companies inside of the S&P 500 index are responsible for the majority of its movement. Bigger the company, bigger impact it has on the movement. You want to guess what sector the top 11 out of 12 companies are in the S&P 500 index right now? Technology companies. Amazon, Apple, Meta, Alphabet. I mean, you can say them, NVIDIA. You can say them right along with me. So it's very, very important to understand. Does that mean that those companies are bad? No. But it essentially means that the S&P 500 index in the last year and a half has become a tech fund. And yes, you can quote me on that. It has become a tech fund, meaning it's moving as these very large multi-trillion-dollar technology companies have been moving. And it's been a good run. There's nothing wrong with that. The only reason that I'm saying that is be aware. And be aware that just as those companies can move quickly in one direction, they can move quickly in the other direction. It's the nature of the beast. So I'm not saying this for you to be concerned that we see that there's going to be some crash out there that nobody else knows about yet. I'm sorry, I'm not your guy who's that kind of a prognosticator. But I do know, and I have been around this business long enough to know that if you anticipate that there's going to be just a move in perpetuity in one direction or another, folks, that just doesn't happen. Not the way that it works. All right, we're rapidly approaching the end of our time together here on Dollars and Cents, presented by North Main Financial. Let's do a lightning fast recap before we got to jump off. We took a look at the Federal Reserve. Tough not to look at them. I mean, we're looking at a change in policy again. Looks like they're going to start cutting interest rates in September. Yeah, a lot can change between here and there, so that's not a done deal yet, but it looks like they're going to start with a 25 basis points, a quarter of a percentage point that should come about here in September. We're going to watch that very closely. And then when we're looking at the kinds of things earnings season-wise that are around us here, we've got some good ones. Talked about Meta there for a little bit, talked about where the markets are. There have been some ones that are not so good. I mean, there are ones that haven't come out as glowing. So it's important always be diversified, know what you own. Folks, I appreciate so much hanging with us here on Dollars and Cents. Hang with us next week at 4 o'clock on Thursdays here on WSIC.
Serving you better than ever before.